All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back for part two of our two-part series with Dr. Karyn Harvey. We're super excited to have everyone back. I know that a lot of people enjoyed that first part, so we're really looking forward to what Karyn has to provide us in the second part here. Quick housekeeping. I'm not going to go through everything again, but I did get continuing education out to everyone for that first part. I just wanted to let everyone know that it is coming encrypted. I know there's been a lot of confusion about that. IT updated our security settings, so anything that I send is going to come encrypted. I am sending you a legitimate email, so please just bear with me. I know it's kind of a pain, but it is coming from me. If you did not receive that first part, continuing education, please reach out to me. I did include my email address right next to my name. There with the two parts, with us Zoom quitting in between, there was a little bit of confusion with attendance. So I just want to make sure that everyone did get that. So please reach out to me if you did not get that. I know someone just said that they found it in their junk mail. Please check your spam. A lot of times, if you don't receive emails from me regularly, it will go to spam. And give me about 14 days for part two. With a lot of people and busy schedules, just give me about 14 days before you reach out to me to ask about your continuing education. But that's all I have. So if we want to go ahead and give it to Karyn, we're going to run from 9 to 12 again today, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you. First of all, thank you, Danielle. Thank you so much. You are such a great supporter, and I really appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
And the Illinois Network, thank you. And thanks to all of you for coming back. Yay. I really appreciate that as well. So as we talked a lot last week about the sources of trauma and, the impact. It was a little depressing. Yes, it gets a little sad, but the great news is that people heal. And the better we get at supporting people and supporting them in their healing, the faster they heal. And I think we all know situations where people have come to us with lots of trauma and lots of stuff. And then they have somehow been able to, just settle and stabilize and kind of even find some joy in their life. And that's what I want to really focus on today. So I feel bad for those people who didn't come back because they only got the bad news. But the good news, we did talk about the triangle, because when people feel safe is when the healing begins. And if they don't feel safe, it's very hard to heal. It's very hard to move forward. So I'm going to talk a lot about that today. All right. So talking about autism, I wanted to just hit on some things and share what I feel is probably one of the most important videos that we have made by people with autism. And, they express things that they want and they need. And more people with autism, or people on the spectrum, depending on how people want to be talked about, have, or referred to, sorry, I've heard different things from different people. I am not on the spectrum. So, I really don't have a vote. So, but what I have heard over and over again lately is many people speaking out saying, I don't want to be fixed. I am who I am. I want to be supported. The first time I heard that was very interesting. I was at a large national conference, and there was supposed to be a talk shared half and half by a psychiatrist and a person with lived experience on the spectrum. And the psychiatrist talked for a very long time, right? They only left 5 minutes for the person with lived experience. And, you could tell that person was a little frustrated. And most of us didn't even understand what the psychiatrist, most of what he was saying. He used a lot of terminology. I should have understood. I'm a psychologist. But, it was a little over my head as well. We're all like, okay, what did he just say? Now what's he talking about? So it was one of those. And the person with autism gets up, and his name was Sean Bickley, a very, very powerful advocate and speaker. He's amazing. And he gets up and he says, I want to know one thing. Why is it that of all the money that's allotted to support me, 97% of it is used to try to fix me, and only 3% is actually used to support me? And he said, the first thing he had actually said is, I am an autistic. So he wanted to be, he said, stop, that's how he wanted to be referred to. I was like, wow. He said, I am an autistic. And stop saying what I am is a disorder. And then he told us, how is it that 97% of the money is there to fix me and only 3% is to support me? And he said, but I need support because I live in a world where the sounds are always screaming. The lights are in my face. I don't know half the time what people really mean. I'm not sure what's going on. But I know that I want friends and I want support. And I don't need people trying to change me. I was like, oh my goodness. That was the most powerful 5 minutes I'd ever heard at any conference. So he used that 5 minutes really well. And since that point, I've been hearing a number of people with autism talk about the trauma of being constantly fixed, right? Emily Titan is a marvelous, marvelous speaker, writer, and advocate. She has a blog. She speaks out very strongly about, growing up and being misunderstood, her parents punishing her when she said, what did I do wrong? What did I say wrong? And they'd say, you know what you did, you know what you said. And she had no idea because she's just trying to get through the world, in the way that her world is, and not being supported. So, I just developed this slide this morning because I was thinking a lot about this section in autism and thinking about so many people that I've heard speaking out. And lately, there's a lot of dialogue on YouTube at certain conferences of people saying that, they spent a lot of their childhood having their behavior worked on and modified, and they felt misunderstood and not supported. So I wanted to talk about for a minute that dichotomy between fixing and supporting. And what does fixing create? Fixing creates that tension, that push-pull. Most of us don't want to be fixed. I know I found that out in my first year of marriage, because I kept thinking, well, if I just tell my husband everything wrong with him, that'll work really well, and then he'll change. That did not go so well. He just had a long list of things wrong with me. And it's amazing I'm still married, because we went back and forth and back and forth. And, finally I understood he doesn't want to hear everything wrong with him. And just hearing it isn't like a big enlightenment. I remember years ago when Rosie O'Donnell, who, she has her own issues, but she used to do a stand-up routine where she had gained weight, and people said to her, oh my God, you gained weight. And she's like, what's this supposed to be, a revelation? Like, oh, that's why my clothes don't fit. I was wondering why my clothes didn't fit. Thank you so much. No, she knew she gained weight, right? Pointing out what's wrong with people, pushing and pulling, sometimes just makes them more defensive, sometimes shuts people down. Having those external contingencies, reward, punishment, or maybe we're not doing punishment, but we have reward or not reward, which kind of is like a punishment, a response cost. That can create some tension. It can, I worked with a number of people when I was at the ARC Baltimore who came to us from a very regimented program that they went through residentially, which has a very good reputation. but everything they did was rewarded or not rewarded, and their only choices were forced choice. And they would come to us and they'd say, well, what do I do now? Or like, what would you like to do? Well, what am I supposed to do? And what's my reward if I do it? You know, they were very, very regimented, and it made them actually dependent rather than independent. And it took years to help people to learn how to make actual choices, to even know their own preferences. You know, we had to really work hard with folks to get them to understand their own preferences, and that we weren't going to give forced choices, that we wanted to know who they were and what they cared about. And then finally, the power struggle, because we give this message, you're in charge, staff, of that person's behavior. That DSP has to make that person act a certain way. And oftentimes when I wrote plans that way, and I wrote some bad plans, this isn't, I'm not saying I'm innocent here. I made a lot of mistakes, and I wrote plans with the loud and clear message that if that DSP did that plan right, then that person wouldn't have behavioral issues. And that was totally the worst thing to do. And they wouldn't remember the details of the plan. They just remember that they had to fix this person and be in charge of their behavior. And often they deteriorate into a parent, maybe similar to the parents they had, you know, and create these kind of power struggles. No, you won't do this. No, you won't. You better stop. You bet. And then this back and forth that often led to incidents. So going to the more positive model, a trauma-informed model, involves support and supporting. And how can we provide that support? I think that's the question. For me, I'll have to tell you, my greatest teachers were, the best teachers in my life were the DSPs who got it. And I'm going to tell you the truth, 9 times out of 10, they did not follow my plans, because my plans weren't that good. And without realizing it, having so many rewards and having, you know, you get it or you don't, and you do this and you get this and you do this and you don't get this kind of setup, there was this constant push-pull. But instead, what I saw is the most effective DSPs were caring, listening, supporting. They accepted that person where they were at. Hey, you're cool. You're good. Those are the most common phrases I heard from really, who I call magic staff, who really know what they're doing. You're cool. You're good. Yeah, I got you. You're doing fine. Acceptance. Rather than, no, you didn't do, are you going to do this today? You better not. Conveying positive regard, or, you know, I respect you. Oh, I really admire how you said that, or you did this, you know, that's positive. Holding up a positive mirror, showing them their best self, and giving encouragement. Just basic encouragement. And that's what I saw over and over again, where, you know, those people who you can give anybody to, no matter how many issues this person has, you know, if you give them to that magic staff, Joe is going to help them calm down. Joe's going to help them turn it around. Being with Joe is like a salve, you know, on the soul. And after weeks and months with Joe, people are chill, right? Do you all know somebody like that, a magic staff? And, you know, through the years, I'm constantly talking to those people, looking for those people, and asking those people what they think are important, because they're my real teachers, they and the folks we support. But they get it. So what I've seen is that acceptance, that positive regard, and that encouragement. I bet you know what I'm talking about. So I have to tell you, and I have to apologize in advance, I am having some technical issues with this particular Zoom platform. There's one common denominator in all the technical issues I have, and it's me. So I'm not blaming the platform. It's usually something with me. So I'm going to have to stop sharing and start sharing again when I show videos. And so you'll just have to bear with me. And I'm going to say, can you see it? Can you hear it? We had some issues last time. Thank you all for coming back after my issues. So we're going to go forward. And I want to show you this video though, and we will take a 10-minute break on the hour. So every hour we'll do that. So at least you can get a little bit of a break. And, but I want to show you this video. To me, it's so important because it was made by people with autism. It's about 2 years old. It's very new. And there's some really important messages here. And I think it's important for us to look at autism through the lens of those who are trying to tell us that they want support. They don't want to be fixed. They want to be heard and they want to be seen. So you'll remember from last week, we saw that video from Mel Baggs, right? Being an unperson, being unseen and unheard, and they said, rage is nothing in comparison to erasure. Being erased is the most painful thing. So, I think it's important for us to understand that. And so many folks are coming to us in the adult world with autism now, and some crazy statistics, or bizarre statistics, I should say, 1 in 49 people are diagnosed with autism, kids. So I don't know where that's coming from. I know there's a lot of theories and there's a lot of research being done, but I think, in our field, this is something we need to get good at, right? We need to figure out how to give the optimum amount of support in ways that can be healing, because there's a lot of trauma associated with autism. There's trauma in living in a world where you get bullied. There's trauma in living in a world where you're looked at as different. There's trauma in living in a world where you get excluded. And yeah, we've come a long way, but we're not where we need to be. So, I think this is an important topic to look in depth at, and how to support healing when there is trauma with so many folks with autism. I'm sure many of you have heard people with autism share stories of being bullied, stories of being excluded, stories of feeling left out, hurt, confused. And so, I think that trauma is there, but we can definitely listen and figure out how to give support that's needed. So I'm going to stop sharing and start, and hopefully this will work. And I'm going to thank you for bearing with me.
Hi,
I'm going to ask for 1 minute. Do you hear this and see this? If someone can unmute and let me know.
Yes, we can see and hear it.
Yay!
First try.
All right, we're on a roll.
Content warning. This film contains a description of the experience of being restrained. This section of the film has a warning immediately before it and is filmed in black and white to make it easy to skip past if you decide not to watch it.
Hi, I am Grant Blasco, a college-bound high school senior.
My name is Jordan Zimmerman. I communicate by typing on an iPad.
My name is Endeavor, and I'm a multimodal communicator.
Hi, I'm Isaiah Graywall from Canada. I type and spell to communicate.
We're all autistic and we are unable to rely on speech to be understood. Most of us are non-speaking. Some of us can speak a little, or from time to time. People have a lot to say about us. They write stories and biographies. They produce plays and make movies about us. But they are not listening to us.
Just because I cannot speak does not mean I don't hear. I hear everything people say to me or about me. I may not show understanding in my face, but I know and understand. Not a word said escapes my so strong ears.
We may be non-speaking and need help with many things, but that doesn't mean we can't contribute to a book, a play, or a movie. If you always leave us out, people think we are not able to participate. That's why most people don't realize that we have a contribution to make. Include us, and you will see that we have so much to give.
To anyone who wishes to represent non-speaking people, I ask that you communicate with us directly. Misrepresentation of non-speaking people leaves us more vulnerable to abuse.
I should not be left out of conversations or presumed incompetent, simply because I don't rely on spoken language.
There needs to be more representation of diverse autistic identities.
The media often shapes how we view ourselves and how others around us view and esteem our place in society. When there is lack of representation or improper representation, it directly feeds into the internalization of stigma, where your membership in a group is the very cause of your negative self-esteem, feelings of inferiority and even feelings of self-hatred.
If your story says there's no hope, people may not realize how many of us can share solutions about how to support non-speaking children and adults. People who write about us tell the world what they think is best. Other people who follow their example could hurt us rather than help us. To be treated like a child just because you can't communicate in the usual ways is humiliating and traumatic.
The way to demean me is to speak to me as if I am a baby.
I don't like people talking about me like I am not there.
Some books and movies include scenes of restraint. These can be painful to watch. You may want to fast forward the next few seconds that are in black and white, where an autistic survivor talks about his experiences with prone restraint.
Every escalation was blamed 100% on me, no matter if they had just done something illegal to me, cornered me, taunted me, taken something I needed, whatever. Your body is tensing up. Your breathing tightens up. Your fists want to clench. You can feel your body betraying you. You can fight or fold. It's up to you. You are hitting the ground either way. You are face down on the floor. You may relax, you may beg, you may play dead. None of it works. If you show pain, they will show you more pain. I thought I was suffocating and I called out to say so, and they laughed. The way people who use restraint talk, you might think it is an almost surgical procedure. It's not. It is a fight with a predetermined winner, who isn't you.
How do we get it right? Consult non-speaking autists from the start and at key points throughout your project. Read our blogs and books. Watch our movies and videos. Learn about our lives.
If you have a voice, you can use it to help bring dignity back for the members of the more marginalized autistics. Let's change the plot lines and the narratives around non-speaking autistics so more and more are allowed to be visible in society and avail of opportunities in all kinds of areas. Then we will truly see more and more non-speaking autistic actors who will be able to provide us with more positive and authentic representations.
Ask us. Listen to us. Nothing about us without us.
Isn't that powerful? Okay, now I'm going to go back to my slides. And thank you for bearing with me. How about Rahima Russells, who says, and we'll definitely have time. I'm going to have comments before each break. So I apologize that it's hard for me to show my slides, speak, and monitor the chat. But as soon as like a little bit before the hour, we'll have Q&A, so we can come back. Thank you for comments. So powerful. How many of you have been in situations where people are talking about someone right in front of them as though they're not there, right? I mean, I've seen that so many times. And she says, I hear everything. Nothing escapes my so strong ears. You know, she says, I may be non-speaking, but nothing escapes my so strong ears. And how many times have we seen that? How many times have we seen that? Just, and how must that feel? Right? How must that feel? And how about the restraints? So I would say the majority of people that I've worked with who have come to us from residential settings, not all of them, but most of the pretty restrictive residential settings for adolescents with intellectual disabilities continue to use restraints and seclusion. And folks have come to us with a whole lot of trauma from that. And that man describes it so poignantly and beautifully. He says, This is not a technical procedure. It's a fight with a predetermined winner. And that feeling of thinking you're suffocating and you're saying, I'm suffocating, I can't breathe, and you get laughed at. Other people have told me stories like this. I bet some of you have heard stories like this, and it can't continue. We can't use this as part of our behavioral interventions. They're traumatizing. Restraints traumatize people. I learned that being a part of a restraint. I didn't always get it. I'm ashamed to say. I was working with one fellow, his name was Keith, and my job at this program, it was a program for folks with dual diagnosis of a mental health issue and an intellectual disability. And my job at this program was I was doing therapy as well as writing behavior plans. And we were so excited. I was so cutting edge. Oh, we're doing therapy. That's when no one was doing therapy. And, I had just finished my PhD and working on my license. And I was so excited. And I was doing this work with this guy, and he was amazing. So he had a horrible trauma history. And as you know from last week, sometimes I tell bad stories. I'm really sorry. I'm trying to have good endings. But this one is mixed. But this guy had a tough history. And his ending is good. He's doing great now, but he had a tough history. And his stepfather sexually abused him and his sister. And he blamed himself for not protecting his sister. And then finally, at one point in his life, he found the strength and the courage to report. And he reported. And his sister and he got put in separate foster care placements. And his mother stopped talking to him and said, "You just ruined our family," and blamed him. And never accepted that her husband had done that. And the husband went to jail for a short period of time, not long enough, and so he had been really devastated by that loss. And what we were doing was guided imagery. So he had some little guided imageries he would go through that really made him feel better. So he had this imagery of him going into the house that he grew up in and getting his sister and saving his sister and calling the police and reporting his father and taking care of his sister. And he did that over and over again. Then we had an imagery where he took care of his child self. And then we had a whole series of things he would do to nurture that child. And it was amazing work. I'd been told by people you can't do that with folks with intellectual disabilities. Not true. You can do so much with them, and each person's different, but therapy works if we can figure out the right modality for each person, because everybody is different. And this was really working for him. He had a behavioral issue, not a big one, but I believe that he grew up pretty poor. Could never know for sure, but I think he went hungry during periods in his life because he stole food. And I found that a lot of folks who were raised in institutional settings where they weren't given food 3 times a day, they had to go, in Rosewood, they put the food in a big pile in the middle of the room. Every meal you had to go fight for your food. A lot of those folks then ended up stealing food, stuffing food. Some folks choked and died from stuffing food, but I believe he grew up pretty poor. And so from time to time, he would steal food, and he had a plan targeting that. And one day he was having a hard day. He was in the refrigerator stealing lunches, and he was grabbing lunches, and his staff saw him and said, "Stop, Keith, stop, put that back." And Keith was giant, right? He was a very tall guy, maybe like 6'5", and very heavy. Now, I think that heaviness again was related to not having enough to eat and always being afraid of not having enough food. And he panicked and just flung his arm, and this little tiny staff guy, went flying. I know in my heart that Keith did not mean to hurt him. I know he didn't. The staff's name was Steve that he flung. And then he started running because he started panicking, like, I'm in big trouble. I'm in trouble. The amygdala was flashing. He's freaking out. First of all, he must have felt some deprivation, that he's stealing the food madly. And then all of a sudden he's in a big state of panic and he's running, and somebody calls the code that we used back then. This was a while ago, for restraints. It was strawberries, which was silly, strawberries. And then everybody goes and restrains him, and they hold him down, which is illegal now where I am, prone restraint. And I helped. And I was holding one of his legs. And he looked over at me with a look of devastation. Et tu, Brute, you know, you too, you. And I'll tell you, we never got back to that point where we could do that therapeutic work like we were doing. He never fully trusted me again. And then it dawned on me, oh my goodness, all these staff that are trying to work with him, when they restrain him, they lose the trust too. And this is happening with all the guys. So we decided we were going to get rid of restraints. You know, we were going to do it. And what we ended up doing is something I've done in several agencies, is that we took every incident where a restraint was used, and we sat down with everybody in that incident and analyzed it and tried to find where was the point when you know, it deteriorated, where was the point when the decisions were made that led to a restraint, and what happened. I mean, every now and then, yeah, somebody runs into traffic, you got to stop them. But we got rid of it in the behavior plans as a routine procedure, because people knew restraints were in their plans, and that caused them to feel lots of fear as they went through their day. And we analyzed every single incident and occurrence. And what we found over and over again was there was usually some point that was a little bit of a power struggle. Stop that, don't do that. What? And that's when it all exploded. And we just went over and over what we could do differently, trying not to point fingers, more in the context of doing like a root cause analysis, like where did things go wrong in terms of how we approach things, but also trying to figure out how next time we could do it differently. And what happened was we were able to get rid of restraints. It only took several months, because those meetings were so horrible that nobody wanted to sit through them. So that was a real motivator. I guess you could say it was punishment. But in any case, negative reinforcement, yes, we removed those meetings and people did better, because they were like, okay, let's just figure this out, because I don't want to have to sit through one of those meetings. But it was a lot easier than we thought to actually get rid of those restraints. And I realized how many times that ruined the trust and how much trauma it caused. So I love showing this video because of the way that gentleman describes his experience. You know, it just says so much. And my experience of being, you know, it wasn't the first time, but it was the first time that I'd really seen that my eyes were really open as how devastating it was to Keith, and how then Keith felt like he couldn't trust me. But I'm happy to tell you that Keith did reunite with his mom. The mom did divorce the dad, and he started visiting her. You know, a lot of good things happened in his life, and he's still doing really well and has a nice relationship with his family. The mom eventually passed away, but he's close with his sister. So things really did turn around for him, and not because of the work I did, because I couldn't follow through on it. But, you know, he got the support he needed as time went on. So what do people need to heal? And what is most important? I had mentioned this last week, and this is the triangle that I swear by. And wherever you hear me present, I'm going to be harping about the triangle, right? But because people need to feel safe, and that safety is at the top, because safety is the most important thing. If people have experienced trauma, and I don't even have to say if, sadly, when, right? Folks have had a lot of trauma. Doesn't mean that they have PTSD, but often they can have different degrees of it. When they have experienced that, safety and being safe becomes the most important issue in their mind and in their heart. Am I okay? Am I safe? And that's why those gifted DSPs who can work with anybody are so good because they convey an emotional safety. I'm emotionally safe. I will not hurt you emotionally. I will be supportive. I will not laugh at you. I will not embarrass you. I will not insult you. I will be positive and caring. And if I'm having a bad day, I'll let you know, because we all have bad days, but I'm going to do my best not to hurt you. And that's safety. Safety is about relationships and being emotionally safe and being in settings or situations where you feel safe. Some folks live with people who might attack them from time to time. And we say, oh, don't worry, we got a behavior plan for them, it's fine. Well, maybe they don't feel safe, right? That's not okay either. So people have to see themselves, perceive themselves to be safe, number one. Number two, they have to have connections and relationships. And relationships heal us, and relationships are very important. The more isolated people are, the more they re-experience their trauma, the more they get in that loop of re-experiencing. And that's really devastating. So I really love to see unpaid relationships. It's great that we have staff. It's great we have wonderful people like yourselves who chose this work, wonderful people who support the supporters, and all the work you do is so great. But we are not enough. We are not enough. People need friends, friends who aren't paid to be their friend. People need love, boyfriends, girlfriends, relationships, whatever they choose, whatever they really want in their hearts, they deserve that, right? And oftentimes the way we work with folks because of our system is very isolating and doesn't support boyfriends and girlfriends, doesn't support a lot of friends. And just being friends with the people you live with, that's not enough, And finally, empowerment. So people need real choices, real person-centered thinking and support. Oftentimes we have beautiful plans. They look so good. They're in their notebooks, they're in their books, or else they're online now, right? Ooh, looks really good. Sometimes they have pictures, but are they being followed? Think about your least favorite job, right? Can you all remember your least favorite job? Mine was Friendly's. I was a waitress at Friendly's. It was horrible. The kids were always screaming. I usually like kids, but these kids were always at their worst. And the ice cream was freezing cold. You have to be in the freezer getting the ice cream. I was always covered with fudge ripple. Couldn't get it out of my hair. And it was just, and the manager took our tips. So you couldn't even get your tips. I said, oh, he always said he was splitting them up, but our checks were so little. And that was my least favorite job. And I remember the happy day of when I quit that job. I was so happy. So you're thinking now of your least favorite job. Maybe it was fast food or a warehouse. I did that for a little while, right? Nanny. Oh, that was a bad job I had. The husband kept hitting on me. That's a whole nother story. Never mind. But in any case, there have been some bad jobs, right? Imagine if you were at your least favorite job, which I hope is not the one you have now, so please quit. But you were at your least favorite job and you quit, right? And you have that wonderful feeling when you quit, or maybe you were lucky enough to get fired, congratulations. And imagine if the next day somebody gave you your lunch in the morning, woke you up, got you breakfast, gave you lunch, said, the van is waiting for you. You got to get on this van. You're like, what? I got to get on a van? Yeah, get on that van. And that van takes you back to that job that you quit. And you tell everybody there, I quit. I'm sorry, I quit this job. And everyone says, oh no, that's good. That's great. But you still have to come. And imagine if day after day, that van keeps coming and taking you to that job. And 20 years later, you're still at that job. Does that ring a bell? Is that anyone that we support or you support? Maybe it's not like that for you guys, but I know a lot of people that are always quitting that day program. I'm not coming. I'm not working anymore. And they're still there. It's not fun. That's not okay. People definitely need some power, some agency. I mean, we all know this, but the system doesn't always support it, right? It's hard. So do people are they really empowered? You know, I've gone back and forth with several people that I really respect about that word empowerment. I've been told by a couple of people, don't use empowerment. It's about power and control, having power in your life, which is true. And so I used to, I changed it to power and control, but then I went back and I said, you know what? I'm going to use empowerment because right now, the system that we're in, we have the power. And so we need to work to actually consciously empower people, because we do have power over what they're going to do every day, where they're going to live, what their life is going to be like. And giving that power back is really important in terms of helping people to heal, because these are the three things that people need in order to recover. They need to feel they're safe. They need to have lots of relationships and connections, and they need power and control over their life, agency, choice. This is Christine, and she had a hard time when I first came to the agency, the ARC Baltimore. She had been so devastated by the death of her dad, and it was so sad. Her father had died, and it was so tough for her. And she stopped going to her job. She lost her job. She was as part of a crew cleaning a hotel. She lost that job because she just shut herself in her room, wouldn't talk to people, wouldn't go anywhere, really for months, just grieving and suffering. And I came and I said, well, has anyone done grief counseling? And they were like, no, because she won't leave her room, So bit by bit, we were able to work with her, support her, do some grief counseling, do some work. She finally came back to the day program. And then, probably about a year or two after that, finally started working in another job, a very limited job, but, making a little bit of money. And then we started a singles group, and we called it Connections. And I'll tell you, I did the dumbest thing. I'm always telling you about the wrong things I did, right? It's kind of embarrassing, but the reality is that's what I've learned the most from. I can't remember half of what I did right, because I'm not even sure it was right, but we just got through it, right? Okay, that's done. But you remember what you do wrong. And what I did, the way we started this singles group, my little team and I, we decided we would do an eHarmony type of thing where we surveyed everybody. So we had all these surveys, like, what's your idea of a romantic date? Is it a walk in the field or an ice cream cone, at the parlor, or whatever, we had all kinds of questions, and even about sexuality and, every single thing. What do you prefer? And what do you like in another person? And then we took them, we had a ton of them, and we matched people up. And we had our big opening event of our singles group with several agencies. We primarily did it for folks with IDD, because our big problem we felt was that people were really lonely, and people weren't going anywhere or doing anything, and they deserved to have relationships, and they deserved relationships that were not paid. So we matched them up. And everyone came in. We had this big room. We had some pizza. You could get a slice of pizza and a soda. And then we gave you a number, and you had to find your number and match it to. There were all these little dyads, all the two chairs facing each other and a table. And you would find your person. Some of them were lined up. And you'd have a dialogue with the person that we matched you up, since we know so much, right? Since we knew it all. Well, I'll tell you what happened. They chomped on their pizza, they drank their soda, they stared at the person, and then after about 15 minutes, everybody got up and went and found someone that they actually really liked. And then all these couples started forming, people reunited who had been in the institution together, other people met each other, other people talked to people they'd known at a day program, and they found someone they liked, and people, or they just hung out with friends. And I learned we got it all wrong. These guys are much smarter. They know who they want and who they don't want. So our it couple the first year, that first year of the singles group, you get your it couple, right? Who hooks up first? And then that was Christine, who had, been healing from the death of her dad, and Derek. And Derek was so wonderful, and they were just the best. They went to every event, and then they just started dating on their own, which was our goal, was to get people to not depend on our events, but to have dates. And we, worked with the staff, and we tried to make sure people had each other's phone numbers and they could call each other. And, we had a big push for cell phones. We were doing everything we could. And so Christine, when her dad died, her mom had died when she was young. So when her dad died, her aunt stepped up. And her aunt was really wonderful in her life, would take her places. She'd go to her aunt's house for holidays. So that aunt was really a wonderful force in her life. And then what happened after a couple of years with Derek, maybe they'd been together about 2 years, the aunt passed away from cancer, just like the dad. And we thought, oh my God, Christine is going to just go down the tubes again. We set up the grief counseling, but, we expected her to just like shut everything down, not come to work, not do any of the things that she was doing. But she didn't do that. She was sad. We did some grief work, but she kept going to the day program. She kept going to work. She kept rolling. And in the grief therapy, I asked her, you're doing so good. It's wonderful. What do you think is different? I know how much you loved your aunt, just like you loved your dad. And she said, I got Derek. Derek's my family. And he is the one that really, not only did he help her heal from the loss of the dad, that really moved her forward, but he's protected her and inoculated her and helped her, supported her through that trauma of loss of the aunt, to the point where she just kept rolling and kept going. So, relationships are so important, so critical. They're still together. I wish I could tell you that they'd gotten married. That didn't go quite as well, and I'm hoping that they will. And actually, she wants to a little bit more than he does, but he likes spending weekends with her, so that's great. I don't know, maybe there's something to be said to that model, but they'll work it out. But that relationship was what helped her so much. The Harvard Men's Study tells us that actually relationships are the most important thing when it comes to having a fulfilled and happy life. They looked at men from Harvard and they compared them to men from the poorest section in Boston and followed them throughout their lives. And what they found was that, they kept evaluating how happy they are. They kept assessing them, interviewing their family and friends. And the happiest people were not the ones with the most money or the highest position or the best education, In fact, some of the most miserable were some of the ones with the most money and some of the ones who'd had the highest positions. The one factor that always correlated with happiness was relationships. People in good marriages were the happiest. And people, even if they weren't in a good marriage, who had a close circle of friends and had really deep and wonderful relationships, happiest. Relationships were everything. And I believe that our biggest problem in our field is loneliness. Yeah, there are many problems, but loneliness is the biggest one. David Petoniak says that actually half the behavioral issues we see are about loneliness and trying to connect with people. He has said this for years. There's a really interesting book called The Good Life by the people who ran that study, were the latest principal investigators from the Harvard study. And they say the risk of death from loneliness is twice as high as the risk of death from obesity. People died early even. And another study was done by Holt Lundstad and a group where they said they found social isolation highly correlated with early death. People need relationships. Relationships heal. The Iraq PTSD study showed that people who went through the same trauma in Iraq, so much PTSD in Iraq, so much loss, people commit suicide, terrible things. lot around PTSD, as we know. But they did a study where they compared people who went through the same trauma, but some were able to just resume their lives, keep going, keep their marriages, come back, have jobs, where others just kind of imploded and, you know, really got taken by that PTSD. And they found that two factors actually correlated strongly with those who were able to keep going and not have such overwhelming symptoms. They may have had a little bit, but they were able to just move forward. Those were the ones who were Skyping with lots of friends and family from home. So when they had a lot of support and a lot of relationships that they were communicating with and in touch with, they were way less likely to develop PTSD than those who were isolated and said they weren't really talking a lot to people, had very few friends and family. That was number one. Number two was the relationships within their unit. So people who felt like I have people who have my back, we love each other, we're there for each other, we're less likely to develop PTSD than those who felt like no one really cares about me, they don't have my back, I don't feel safe in my unit. Again, relationships are what count. It's so impactful to see that. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing and open it up for questions before we break.
So not a question, but I wanted to discuss Cassie's comment. We talked last time, she was talking about her Peter fiance who was fired from his job after he stood up for himself. And she had just said that there definitely needs to be more education on supporting people like her fiance, because that lack of support, you know, was kind of what caused him to be punished and fired from his job, you know, because he stood up for himself. You know, she said he's still fighting and grieving, and, you know, the only thing that she can do right now is pray and give him the support in whatever way that she can.
Oh, Cassie, he's so lucky to have you. You know, we see a lot of real research now supporting how important relationships are, and how you being there for him is a big factor in his healing. You know, that, and my experience has been doing therapy with folks who've had those kind of job traumas is very helpful as well. You know, therapy, as well as a good job coach who will help you kind of get back on your feet. But that relationship is so sweet and wonderful. That guy's lucky to have you.
And then we did have a question from Caitlin. She said that they're a hands-off agency, meaning they provide no physical management. But she's curious as to how you've worked with individuals who become violent and aggressive. She said they're currently struggling with an individual who targets another one of his housemates during this behavior.
Yeah, you know, that's always a conundrum. And I think, well, we have limited finances, but what we've tried to do is, if they're targeting somebody, get them away from that person and have them not live with that person. What we've done in agencies, I worked in one agency where we took people who had bombed out of many other programs, and we were kind of the end of the road. And we figured out resources to get people to live by themselves and with staff coming and going, because sometimes it's just too dangerous for that other person until they really calm down. We try to do a lot of therapeutic work as well, and helping people to have a full life with lots of activities. There's so many different aspects, and of course, not knowing this person, we don't know what their particular trauma is and what their particular triggers are, but it sounds like this housemate is a trigger. And I know it's very hard to rearrange people and move people and do these things. It's very hard, but I think it's really important in our behavioral approaches that we identify triggers and identify what people need to feel safe. And this person could probably be a trigger for him, even though the person's doing nothing. They may just look like, or the sound of their voice remind him of some kind of trauma, or be some trigger in a way that we don't understand. But we have focused on getting people away from triggers, trying to help them feel safe, trying to help them to feel as supported as possible, and only then gradually reintroducing them to living with others. That's hard, I know, financially. I know that's hard, but I have had success with that. Great question.
There were no other questions that I saw come through on the chat. Everyone was talking about how powerful that video was that you shared.
I'm so grateful for it. I'm so grateful. Thanks. Okay, so let's take a 10-minute break.
Perfect. We'll come back at 5 after?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
We'll see everyone in 10 minutes. All right. It looks like we did have one question come through as we are on break. And that's just, is there a way to advocate for more therapeutic services or counseling work with individuals who have, that dual diagnosis of an intellectual or developmental disability and a mental health diagnosis?
That is a passion of mine. It's so important for us to do that. And I wish I had the answer. I try to advocate for that. It's really critical. I have a training that I do for people, which I shouldn't have to do, because what I hear everywhere I go, people say that they try to find therapists, and often a therapist will say, well, I'm not trained in working with people with intellectual disabilities. And there is no training. And so I just tell stories all day, and I give them a certificate. I say, go a little slower. And that's the main point of the whole thing. I have a lot of materials that people can use, but I think the real answer is for us to be a bridge, to just keep trying to find those therapists willing to work with our folks and be involved, and tell them, because if they're working, sometimes when they're working in a vacuum, that's not too good either. I know as a therapist, for me, I try to bring the staff in for the very end of the session, and so they feel a part of a treatment team, and I get permission from that person to just share a very little of what they're going to work on that they feel comfortable sharing, so that it's not an us against them type situation. But I think we're the ones who have to build the bridge, sadly. I hope it's going to change, but oftentimes we're told by people, oh, it's not my specialty and I'm not trained, so I can't do it. And that's just ridiculous. Brian Talent says something really wonderful. He runs a fantastic clinic in Denver. And he says that, it's a cultural competency, and we have to stop talking about it as though they're a different type of person. We're all just human, right? And it's a cultural competency. Frank, thank you so much. I did hear about that. I did hear that there was a program, I know, for social work, right? It's a social work program, and there's a social work program up in Minnesota as well, where they have a piece. Thank you. So it's a little bit here and there, but compared to the need we have, right? But really, people should just figure it out. I always say, you're not trained, you are trained. Are you trained in working with humans, right? Because they're human. It's a cultural competency. So if somebody from Cameroon came to me and said, I want therapy, I work with a clinic now, we wouldn't say, well, we are not trained in working with Cameroonians, right? We'd say, okay, well, let's learn about it. And, oh, there's a conflict there. Are you on the French side or the English speaking side? And how's that affected your family? We try to maybe educate ourselves a little bit, but we wouldn't reject that person because no one trained us in how to work with folks from Cameroon, just like we shouldn't be rejecting folks with intellectual disabilities or developmental. Like, my goodness. Thank you. Sorry to go on that rant. You push the button. Yeah, I'm very passionate, and people deserve that. People deserve this, and in fact, that's my next slide. So let me go and share my slides. And here we go. So access to treatment is a human right. So you're going to think that everyone's going to think that I planted you in that question, because this is such a passion for me and so important. So I really feel like, just addressing behaviors is not what human beings really need in terms of holistic treatment. Yeah, we maybe need to structure the environment, look at the setting environment, look at the triggers. These things are very important. Even have some incentives, but not for everything, maybe just for certain things. Okay, fine, but that's not enough. And it's not enough when people have had trauma. They deserve treatment. They deserve that, because the rest of the world can get it. at least the rest of the first world, but the rest of the world that we know can get it. So in fact, I have a friend, and another sad story, but I met her because I did a talk on trauma back in the day. I used to go on and on about it, and people would be like, are you crazy? Like, I got a lot of pushback. People said things to me, you don't understand. It doesn't affect people with disabilities like it does other people. That would just get me so mad. So you're getting to see who I am, right? So I'd go on these tirades. No, everybody, are you kidding me? This is about trauma, and people with disabilities have more trauma because of people like us who don't get them. We're making it worse. I would go on and alienate everybody. I'm trying to get a little bit cooler now. But so back in the day, I had given this talk at a conference, and she came up to me and she was crying, and she said, oh my God, I didn't realize that this is what has affected my daughter. And her daughter had been sexually assaulted at her high school. And before that, her daughter had been kind of she was the cheerleader with the disability. She was enjoying high school, and she was included, and she had a place. Her daughter has autism, and she had her place and was enjoying it. But then after that assault, first of all, she didn't tell until it was a little too late to really get evidence. But my friend, her mom, went to the school and said, this happened and you need to pursue it. The school would not pursue it. There was no evidence, but the school kept her in the same class with this person who did it to her, this guy. So this young woman started having a meltdown, right, in school. And she would walk into class and see him, and she'd run out. Sometimes she'd throw things. Sometimes she screamed at the teacher. And they ended up kicking her out of that school. How many times do we see that? People have a trauma response that we talked about. The amygdala is firing and telling them they're in danger. So they're just freaking out, and maybe they're trying to use their behavior to protect themselves, or maybe they're just flailing and attacking because they feel threatened and their brain is convinced that they're in big danger. And every time she saw him, she was triggered. And she gets blamed and she gets kicked out. And then she's in this transition program for transitioning youth. And they're supposed to be very oriented towards finding people jobs, but they say every meeting they have that she is not eligible to get a job because of her behavior, because she sees strange guys and she doesn't feel comfortable, and she yells sometimes if someone talks to her, a guy approaches her. And then my friend said, oh my God, this is all trauma. And she got a chapter out of my book and gave it to the whole team and said, can we talk about this? Can we read this chapter and talk about it? I'm like, well, in retrospect, I didn't really do a great job of writing it. That was my first book. I'm still working on how to say it better. But they were like, oh, wow, maybe it is the trauma and not that she just has bad behaviors. And so she set about trying to convince them to, help her find a job anyway. So she got a volunteer job first, working with animals. And then, after several years of doing that, her self-regard went up, up, up. She started seeing herself differently. And she actually now works for Facebook. She has a job for Facebook setting up the conference room. So she cleans up the conference rooms and sets it up for meetings. And it's a part-time job. She lost it during COVID, but then she got it back. And she also got therapy. But my friend had to go to 15 different therapists. And she's in touch with me the whole time, right? Because we formed this bond at that conference. And she's telling me this one won't work with them. They say they're not trained in working with people with disabilities. This one won't work with her. They say they don't know how to do it. This one. And finally, she got somebody who was just straight out of school, who didn't know that she didn't know, and was wonderful. And she stayed with that person for years. And it really helped her. That and being able to find her place in the world, get that job and get that, kind of a role in the world. So between the therapy and that job support, she's really doing great. but people deserve that. Here's somebody, we started a group at the, actually a program at the Arc Baltimore called the Healing Center. At first I called it the Trauma Center. That's the dumbest thing to call it. Nobody wants to go to the trauma center and get more trauma, right? That's what it sounds like. But then we called it the Healing Center. And what we did was we took people who we knew had a lot of trauma, like had, this guy in a horrible accident, and, people who had witnessed, we had a Rwandan refugee who didn't even speak English, but we gave her lots of support. So we took all these folks and we supported them. And from September to June, we did EMDR, type of trauma therapy. We had group therapy, and then we used expressive therapies. We were lucky to have a music therapist part-time who did some work with us, and we did a lot of art projects and used art. We did yoga. For a lot of folks, it was chair yoga, with their limitations, but the yoga was really helpful. I think most helpful of all was group. And here's Elena. And when Elena came to us, she was very angry, and she always looked really angry. And when we had music therapy, she wouldn't play an instrument. And then we had singing, she wouldn't sing. She said, I don't sing, and I don't do this, and I don't do that. But the one thing that started to open her up was group therapy. And I found group therapy to be very, very helpful. The groups that I've done and the groups that I've supervised people to do, I think have probably been some of the most helpful interventions that we've done. So we had group 3 times a week, and she really started to open up to the group. And we thought she was angry because of her horrible trauma history, which was that she had seen her stepfather stab and kill her mother in Baltimore City when she was 13. And, oh my God, right? So, but interestingly enough, when she finally started opening up in group, she told the group that her friend Mary had helped her, and Mary was the one she loved, and that she killed Mary. And that was her firm belief, was that she had killed Mary. And she told us this involved story, which was that she and Mary were housemates, but Mary was the love of her life. You don't know whose people's heart is and who their love is. And that was the woman of her life. And one night Mary wouldn't eat at dinner, and she said, you got to eat, you got to eat. And she was yelling at Mary to eat. Said, you have to eat to be healthy. And Mary stuffed so much food that she choked, and they weren't able to save her. So from then on in, Elena had always looked really horrible. And she was in our day program and not in our residential, and we didn't know any of this. And it turns out she had it was self-hate. She had turned, all her despair on herself and blamed herself because she had told Mary to eat. And so she opened up to the group, and she burst into tears and said, I killed her. And that group was so beautiful. They made a line, and one person after another came up and hugged her and told her it wasn't her fault. Even folks who had trouble speaking got the words out. The young woman who's the Rwandan refugee couldn't even speak, and she's, oh, good, you're good. Did everything she could to say something kind, and hugged her and hugged her. Everybody hugged her, and they supported her. And we did all this grief work with everyone. It turned out most people, most of their trauma really was centering around who they lost. And the grief work seemed to be the most healing thing that we did of all the work we did. We had these boxes that we decorated and that to symbolize the colors that represented the person you lost. And we had little feathers and sparkles and things you could put on it to make it look like that person to you or represent that person. And then you could write a message to that person and put it in the box, this memory box, and take it home and keep it next to you so you could feel a little bit of that person with you. Also did the Goodbye book, which is on my website, which I've used for 20 years with folks, where they just honor that person that they've lost and celebrate their life and celebrate who they were to the person, kind of building that sense of identity along with that. But here is Elena, who never smiled, who wouldn't sing, who wouldn't do anything. Here she is after she got, went through the group and kept talking about it in group and got that support. We also did EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing with her. And then here she is when she made that memory box for Mary.
Yes. And I made this for my roommate, Mary. I missed her and I love her.
Oh, good job, Mama.
And I also put a message in there.
Okay.
Dear roommate, I miss you and I love you.
Good job, Mama.
Thank you.
Isn't that great? And that smile, right? That smile is so wonderful. And we started seeing that smile all the time. She wouldn't do anything in her day program. She started volunteering and doing all kinds of stuff. And we couldn't get the mic out of her hands every time we had karaoke. She started singing. It turned out she loved old Beatles songs. So she was always singing an old Beatles song. She really healed. People need that grief work. It's so devastating when they lose someone they love, especially when you have such a small circle of people, unpaid people. So I wanted to talk, since I have a little extra time here, you guys have given me so much time and appreciate it. I wanted to share a video that we made about the Healing Center. I'm going to have to stop sharing and start again. But, because we decided that the most important thing was to get the most therapeutic setting we could. We did the group work, we did the individual work, we did the expressive therapies. We just did everything we could to help people to heal. And it was time limited. So I am on there, and I have to tell you, it's a little embarrassing. I have the most ridiculous looking necklace on, which later broke, but, and I never got it fixed because I was embarrassed when I realized how dumb it looked, and I talk too much as always. But so here we are talking about the Healing Center. Okay. This is going to take a minute. Oh, and it's not, what do you know? Nothing is queued up. Okay, I have to apologize. It's going to take me a minute. I thought I had it queued up, but I evidently shut things down when I was checking my email during break. Never check your email during break, right? Okay. I apologize. Okay. All right, so hopefully you can see this. I'm going to ask, can you hear it and can you see it?
We cannot see it. We can hear it.
Okay.
Right now we see your web browser.
I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to start again. Okay. Here we go. How's that?
Now we can see it.
Thank you. Thanks, Danielle. What an adventure.
I'm Becky Riley-Olin. I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor and a board-certified music therapist through the ARC Baltimore. I'm one of the therapists here at the Healing Center. We lead a variety of therapeutic activities here to address trauma. So group music making, songwriting, therapeutic singing. We also do art-based activities, therapeutic movement in the form of stretching and yoga-based mindfulness and deep breathing.
The program is divided into 3 sections. So the first section is intensive trauma work. And interestingly enough, during that period, we actually found that the root of everybody's trauma, even though we have people with horrible trauma histories, terrible accidents, one witnessed her mother stabbed in front of her, many losses, but the root of all of it was grief and loss. Second part is building identity. And that's what we're engaging in part 2, that we really want folks to have a strong sense of self. The last section is that discovery of a purpose and sense of mission. Part of that mission might be, I can be somebody's girlfriend or boyfriend or husband or wife, or I can work. In fact, we've already seen great changes in motivation levels. And to get that sense of purpose, like my life can have meaning.
So our average day here at the Healing Center always includes a welcoming song. We sing the same hello song each time we're here. It's great bonding, it's great connection, and I think it really facilitates our ultimate goal, which is healing. We always do a check-in as to how we're doing, how we're feeling, and what's going on in our lives.
Most of them, when they come, they're very shy, they're real quiet. But through the efforts of the Healing Center, you can see them open up, they talk about their past. They support one another. I think that's one of the greatest parts of the group is they became their own little family. And they all support each other, and it's really nice.
I think when we all started the program, the intent that we had was to create a place that was safe and comfortable, that people wanted to come back to. And for a lot of the folks that we work with, they have never really had experiences talking about how they feel, other than being told by somebody that what they're doing is wrong or the way that they're expressing those feelings. The people who come on a regular basis have been making some really big strides in being able to put a label on what that feeling is. This has been an awesome service for the people who attend, but also for us, because we've learned more about what people need from this kind of program.
I feel safe here. I feel happy to help my other friends here. They need support too. I'm not the only one who needs support. They need support too. It's really helping me here. Learn to take a deep breath. Learn to not get upset, or cry. This center helps me a lot. Yes, and I love it here.
I can see rain now when rain is gone.
Our ultimate hope here at the Healing Center as clinicians is to truly assist the individuals we're supporting in working through their trauma so that they're not so stuck and that they're really able to move forward in their lives.
It's the highlight of my week to be able to come 3 days a week and see these people growing and becoming new people and letting what is inside of them out. And they help each other out in ways that we never could. I mean, there may be a day where somebody comes in and you can tell that they're vulnerable and they're hurting. And we're sitting around trying to figure out, okay, well, how do we step in and make this better? And then someone in the group next to them just gets up and goes and gives them a hug. And that's the beauty of working with a group, is that the group comes together to support each other.
I learn how to talk it out. My feelings. And everybody's feelings. I listen to them too. I'm glad I came here.
So that's my goal. My goal is that they will leave, with these issues resolved, with a sense of who they are, and then a sense of how they can make a difference in the world.
Okay. Yay. Is it still going on? No. I wish I could tell you, and they're still going on even though I left that job. No, but the experience changed us so much that my entire staff that did it, there were 5 of us, and all of them are in different clinics now. Actually, 2 of them are in private practice, and they're all working with folks with IDD and all doing, that's the bulk of the work they do. So I hope to have another healing center sometime soon. I hope to, and that maybe work with other people in this model, because it's such a wonderful model. We found people who just were not really doing much in their life because of their trauma. some of them refusing to go to a day program, others just sitting at a day program. You know, folks, there was one young woman, we did it for 7 years. One woman who, you know, she had so many work skills, but she refused to go work at a job because one time she had been bullied at a job. You know, we were able to process that and work with her and just talk about all the bullying she'd gotten. And she shared a lot in group, and she's working. She got a job. She had great work skills. And she's working part-time. So, you know, treatment is so critical, and it's a right. It is a right. I believe that so strongly. Okay, hold on. I'm going to go back to my sharing, but I have to get rid of this. Thank you. Thank you for bearing with me. You're such a nice and patient group of people. Okay. And I so appreciate that. Okay, so that was the Healing Center. Now I want to talk, so I'm talking a lot today about what heals people, right? And really looking at what is that recovery process? Because I think, you know, if we acknowledge the fact that just about everybody with IDD has experienced some kind of trauma, you know, most people have experienced something, and just about everybody with IDD has experienced bullying, been called the R word, been rejected in some way or excluded. And as we talked about last week, these are all sources of trauma, let alone the high incidence of sexual abuse. It's just unbelievably high, and you know, physical abuse and all the other things that folks go through, institutionalization and the traumas of the severe treatment people had years ago in institutions, and even more recently, you know, in some places. So we can assume trauma, then we have to look at healing. If we finally say, yeah, the trauma is there, then it's our moral imperative to say, well, what heals people? Not just what fixes them, right? But what heals them, what supports them. How can they move forward past their trauma, past their pain, to have a happy life, you know, a joyful life, a life at least pursuing happiness, right? And I think a big piece of that is having a sense of identity, having a sense of self. And I really believe that we have to look at how can we support people in seeing themselves as somebody valuable and worthwhile. You know, the big question in human development is, who am I, right? Who am I? How do I fit in this world? Where do I stand? How do I make a difference? Or who am I to the others, and who am I to myself? So Erik Erikson talked about the most important stage of development he talked about development throughout the entire lifespan, but that the most important stage for having a successful adulthood is in adolescence, forming a sense of self and identity. And he said the big conflict was between identity versus role confusion, like knowing who you are and having a sense of where you're going based on your sense of identity, not necessarily just a goal or an aim, but actually based on who you are. Then you can form a goal, then you can move forward, then you can have intimate relationships, you can do all these things that are a part of adulthood. But without a sense of identity, it's a very difficult process, a stop and start and confusion. And he said the big conflict was between identity and forming a good sense of identity versus role confusion and not knowing who you are. And my belief is what happens in the world of intellectual disabilities is not just a role confusion, it's an actual negative identity, because people are told over and over again what they're not. No, you're not going to marry and have kids. You're not going to have a job like your brother. You might have a little job, but you're not going to be supporting the family. You're not going to college. And they're finding all this out in adolescence when the rest of us are finding out who we are, right? How we can form a sense of self. If you think about your teenage years, you know, maybe they were up and down, but hopefully in there you realize some strength that you had. Oh, I'm going to be this kind of person. Oh, I'm good at sports. I'm going to be like an athletic person, or I like art and I'm going to be an art type person, or I love people and I'm going to work with people, or I love kids and I'm going to get married and have kids, whatever. We had some kind of sense of self that we could then base a trajectory on. Versus if during that critical developmental time, you're being told what you're not, and your whole life is showing you, no, you're not going to drive. I'm sorry, you don't get a driver's license like your brothers and sisters or like everybody else. Oh no, you're not a part of this team. You're not here, you're not there. Versus that positive sense of self. This is who I am, right? I do this well. I have friends. I have preferences. I make a difference. And that's so critical. With so many people, I have this book on my website, my book To Celebrate Me. And I've used it in a number of situations to help people develop a sense of self. And in that book, it has what, favorite colors, favorite this, favorite that, favorite foods. Number of people that we work with didn't even know. Well, what do you think I like? No. You tell me what you like. Because for so long they've been told who they are and had no sense. So building that sense of self is so critical and so important. And it's never too late. Just because we may have missed adolescence, that's okay. I think it's very important in the process of healing that we help people discover who they are and to develop a sense of self, develop an identity of, yeah, I am someone. I may not be like my brothers or sisters, but I'm me. And I'm okay with who I am and having an acceptance of that as well. And if you think about the people you support, right? And that struggle to be someone. I know I've worked with a number of people who made their behavior their identity, right? Well, I'm really bad. Or they were identified by their behavior. Like, remember Judy from last week? Oh, I'm a fire setter, right? Or I'm this, I'm that. No, you're a human being. So finding that positive identity, I think, is a task that's lifelong and something we can really support people with that can become a big piece of their healing and really critical. So here we are with another video. Oh my goodness. I know I show a lot of videos and I'm going to say why for me. And in this training, I've shown a little more than I usually do because I have a little extra time. Thank you, Danielle. But it's so important to me to give voice to the voice of folks with IDD rather than talk about them, or always talk for them. That is just not okay with me. And so my goodness, I'm so grateful for YouTube. And there was a show, it was a reality show. I'm so grateful for these reality shows like Love on the Spectrum, right? And Born This Way. It was a reality show, which was just for people with Down syndrome. So little isolated there, but it was very interesting because a big theme of this show was how people grapple with their identity. And this fellow, Steve, talks about his struggle and shows us his struggle with identity. And, at first it seems like it's just an innocent little exchange where, he's sharing what kind of girl he likes because they want him to, there's one friend who has Down syndrome wants him to date someone with Down syndrome. And she's very attached to that and saying, no, you have to date someone with Down syndrome, which of course is not the reality and not okay. But what's very interesting about this is that he then reveals how he really feels. And that's so poignant because he talks about the fact that, he doesn't want to be this person that he basically is. And so, and he talks about that in the context of the woman that he wants to be with. And now I have to find it. Sorry, I had everything queued up and never should have checked my emails. There we go. Thank you for being so patient with me.
How about switching your insurance to
Now, can you hear that and see that?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay. And
JM. I'd save a ton of money, but it would really hurt my ego.
When the stakes are high.
Do you need a snack?
Want a snack?
I don't thank you. I'm good.
Are you sure?
I'm good. Come on, dude, man up.
It's fine, don't worry. Maybe we can talk something else. So, Steven, so you don't have a girlfriend, right?
No.
Who's your type?
My type? Well, I do like smart girls.
Okay.
Well, would like someone who doesn't have a disability. So like Emma Watson.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Why you don't want the girls without Down syndrome?
How can I put you this politely to you? When it comes to girls and dating, I kind of go for the typical.
If you are dating someone without Down syndrome, it means that you hurt somebody's feelings. It's called assaulting people.
I'm not insulting anybody. What is this, like a therapy session?
No.
Are you trying to hypnotize me or something?
No. Like, for example, Angel and I were strangers. And we went to Special Olympics. Then after that, me and him were girlfriend and boyfriend. And he's the one day proposed to me.
People with disabilities are have a different communication than others, and I feel like sometimes I get frustrated when the conversation kind of is one-sided. You're acting like a grandma from the 50s.
I'm not your grandma.
First, there was rude. Like a grandma, does not not my say. grandma. Because you come off as this cutie two-shoes kind of gal.
I didn't say that. I tried to ask you
That's not...
the question, why you don't want to date with some of the girls who without a Down syndrome?
It's just how I look at things, how I actually react to people. Can I have some help over here?
Sure thing.
Christina's trying to ask me something that I kind of feeling a little uncomfortable with.
Okay. All right. What's up?
When it comes to girls, I kind of go for the typical.
But are you feeling like you're kind of limiting who you might want to be pursuing based on the fact that you don't want to date somebody who might have a disability?
It's kind of just been my thing ever since growing up. Growing up, I kind of felt like my disability was more of a curse as opposed to just accepting it. And I kind of felt hidden from it.
Okay, so you were kind of trying to maybe deny that part of yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's how I felt when I was growing up. Yeah.
That's hard.
I just kind of wanted to be somebody else rather than myself.
Yeah. You know, there's a part of you has some things that you're struggling with. Parts of your identity that you're still trying to cope with.
Yeah.
Does that sound right? And that's hard work. And I think that you might be going through a lot of that hard work right now.
I feel that you are feeling down. It's okay to be sad, but I'm trying to help.
Bottom line, Christina, you want your friend to be happy.
Yes.
Right?
You can make your life anything.
all right. Well, we're going to be coming back to that guy after the break. That's not the last you're going to see of him. But to me, that was really important because, he was able to honestly say, I'm struggling with who I am. it was really deeper than just the relationship, right? It's my identity. I'm trying to hide who I am, hide behind, he said it. He said, I wanted to be somebody else rather than myself. And that's a really hard way to live. And there was several characters that actually revealed that kind of thing. There was a woman whose mom was Japanese and whose mom had kind of directly expressed shame about having her daughter have a disability. And at one point she really, maybe that, okay, so Caitlin has a good, I know I've been putting that off, but I to respond right away, but she is, sometimes the reality show will be a little fake and they will push it. Good point. But the reality of many people that I've worked with is that sense of shame. And we talked about shame being the source of trauma sometimes, that shame being the root of it. Like bad things happen to me because I'm a bad person, or I'm excluded because I'm a bad person. I don't want to be the person that I am. The reality show piece, I know, but also I wanted to show this clip because the real piece of struggle that folks go through, with that sense of self. And I believe that that's the thing that we can directly address. We can directly address and directly support people in developing a positive sense of identity. We can help them. And again, some of the very gifted staff I've seen knew how to do that. So I'm going to tell a quick story and then we'll have more comments and questions because I really appreciate that. Reality shows do they kind of sculpt things, shall we say. But I've seen this so much. So there's one fellow that came to us and his name was Jason. And he was adopted. He had, as we talked about last week, he had the cocaine and alcohol exposure in utero and born into this chaotic situation, a lot of trauma, a lot of damage, biological damage. So he had a lot of impulse control. And he was adopted by a very nice family who had some resources and had 2 older children. He had a brother and a sister. And he was always the kid with the behavior problem. And in school, he got in trouble. No one could believe that he was with those other 2 in that same family. And he would tell us that. And he was kicked out of several schools. And then he ended up, which is what we used to do in Maryland, whenever a kid with an intellectual disability was too difficult and had too many behavioral issues, we send them to New Jersey. So we had sent him, Maryland had sent him to New Jersey, and he was in this program that was very, intense, a lot of restraints and seclusion and all kinds of things in this program in New Jersey. And then he aged out and my agency wanted to serve him. So we had to go up there and get him. And the first thing he said to us is, I'm really bad. I'm really bad. I'm worse than anyone you know. I'm the worst. We're like, okay. And then we placed him. He had, a job. He had a 2-on-1 staff. So Maryland agreed. The state of Maryland agreed. Yeah, there are a lot of issues here because they funded a 2-on-1. Now, my experience with a 2 staff to 1 person is it doesn't always work that well because oftentimes the 2 staff kind of hang out with each other and talk to each other. That guy gets ignored. So that's what happened with Jason. Like they would go, he had to live by himself. They served him by himself because he had this history of aggression. And sure enough, those first couple of weeks, he tore that house up. He broke some things, kind of showing everybody how bad he was. Got into it with staff, got into it with people. And then he was at the greenhouse. We had a greenhouse setting, but he would love to run away. He would say, I'm eloping. And he'd run into the woods. We had woods behind the greenhouse to try to get the attention of his staff to chase him, right? That was fun. And every time he visited his dad for the weekend, the dad would give him something. And oftentimes those little gifts never worked well for us. So one time dad gave him firecrackers and he's like, I'm eloping. And he gets the guys to chase him, and he also had a match. Somehow he had either a lighter or matches, I don't know what, but he lit the firecrackers and threw them at him and went pump, a little pop. And, these guys are screaming. They thought they'd been shot, because that's what happens in Baltimore City. Like, when you hear that pop, uh-oh. But, we were running out there and, oh, it's firecrackers. Jason, you threw firecrackers at them. That's so dangerous. He's like, I know. So I'm really bad. Yeah. He's always telling us this is who he is. This is his identity, and that's when I coined the phrase behavior as performance art, because he was a true artist. One time he called 911 and said he was going to shoot a cop. And I couldn't believe it. Like, he said, oh, I was just trying to commit suicide by cop. I'm like, why would you do that? Thank God he was white, because otherwise he probably would have been killed. I mean, what a disaster. What a disaster. Sorry to say that, but it's kind of true here in Baltimore. And then another time, they went to the Inner Harbor in one of the outings, the community outings, and he was with the staff, and probably they weren't paying attention to him, because he runs, and he goes, I'm eloping, and he runs into an alley. Dad had given him a cell phone. Thanks, Dad. He pulled out the phone. It's a human right. I know technology is a human right. He dials 911 and he says, I'm being chased by 2 black men. And the police come and arrest the guys. We had to go get them out. That's when we had a new policy. Everybody has to bring their work ID to work. We didn't even have work IDs. We had to all go to the office and get them. He was something. But he had a staff who believed in him. And this guy was working with him when he was by himself. And the guy had 3 guys in a house, and they had an opening. It was a home for 4 people. And he said, I want Jason to come live in my house, my other house, because he had several houses that he supervised, the house manager. His name was Ty. And I was like, oh no, that's not going to work. He's going to hurt someone. But they did it anyway. And they never listened to me, which was a good thing, because he ended up getting along really well with those guys, because he'd been pretty lonely. And these were the coolest guys, they all were somewhat independent, and Jason really wanted to fit in, and Jason really hit it off with them. And then Ty said, well, I want him to work at the program that I work in, because Ty also worked during the day at a computer program, and where they had folks without disabilities and folks with disabilities. And he said, and they need someone to operate the forklift. I'm like, oh, hell no. And he said, well, Jason's dad is helping him get a license, which I already knew and was really alarmed at, because every time Jason came to the office, I would run outside just to make sure my car didn't get stolen, because I knew him. But guess what? They had him running the forklift, not driving around, but just he could operate, lift and lower. And he started working, and his whole attitude about himself totally changed. He saw himself as somebody who was a part of a team, a part of a group, and a valuable part of that team. And with a job, he ended up getting a job at Walmart. He ended up getting a girlfriend. And he is, to this day, on the board of that agency, and advocates for the other folks. And really, I mean, it seems like amazing, but it's not, because what happened was Ty believed in him. Ty showed him himself in another light. And he really changed, because he could see another side of himself. He could see, oh my gosh, I can work this really important job. Now he's working at the Walmart. He's not operating the forklift there though. But complete difference once he had that sense of self, and I learned from Ty. I had to admit, I totally got it wrong. So, identity is so much. Identity is big, and people need to see themselves in that positive light. Now I'm going to stop sharing. And I wasn't sharing. Now I'm going to open it up for questions. I didn't have a picture of him anyway.
I have not seen any questions come through.
Okay, great.
So we might be okay to go ahead and take a break. And then if anyone has some questions during the break time, we can address those once we return.
Wonderful. I love it. So we'll just keep going. Thank you for hanging in there. So Ashley says something. What is that? Let's see. Okay, Ashley says, with some parents or guardians, I can find it very difficult to help their adult children have their own adult identities. That is so true. They continue to see them as children. It can be a huge barrier to helping clients build relationships, especially romantic partners. Great question. So maybe we'll take a few more minutes and then we'll take our 10 minutes so we can address this. You know, my goodness gracious. Ashley, thank you for saying this. And this is why it's very difficult when folks remain in the family home, because they often are kept in that role as children, and everybody deserves to be an adult. You know, I worked with this one fellow who was sexually abused, and I started meeting just with the mom. I met with him for a long time, but then I started meeting with the mom, just trying to talk her into getting a placement for her. And for him, I'm sorry, not for her. She could stay in her house. And she finally got the placement for her, and he was having all kinds of behavioral issues. And don't you know, when he went into that home, he didn't have any more behavioral issues, maybe once a month, but it was 3 or 4 times a week. And it all turned around because he had his own life. And he said, this is my apartment. He would call his room his apartment because his older brother had an apartment. What I try to do is a couple of things. Number one, for years I ran a mom's group. I helped out with the mom's group, and then I ended up taking it over. It's so important that moms talk to other moms who've done it. One of my dear friends got her son, talked her son's girlfriend into allowing the girlfriend to marry the son. They were saying no, no, no. And she told me the other day how that family has come back to her and thanked her because the kids are so happy. I mean, I think, how can we really support those parents who have their own trauma? You know, and that's a whole nother training, right? The traumas of the families, because the families have it. So I see some children do not want to let up telling their children what to do. Exactly, because that's part of their identity. I'm the parent. That's why we have to support those families, but also help the kids to find ways to live outside of that home. I've seen a lot of improvements when people are placed somewhere, when they believe that it's their own. You know, this other guy, he put holes in the wall. He punched his sister the day of her prom. She had a black eye for her prom. He was so off the hook, and we talked his mom into a residential placement. It took a long time because she felt like it was a failure for her. He got into that placement, and we saw a different person. I wrote a very involved behavior plan because I expected him to be putting holes in the wall. He never put a hole in the wall because he said, no, this is my place. This is our place. This is where we live. And he had a lot of resentment towards his parents. You know, he had a lot of issues that he was able to let go of, living in his own place. Yeah, so good for you, Cassie. You have every different perspective. You should be doing this training. You're a mom and a QIDP. Wow, that's fantastic. So you know, because you've done it, and it's so important. And I understand that the guardians, so I've talked with a lot of parents and guardians about placements, and I just encourage them to be a presence. You don't have to have them in your home, but be there, drop in at different times, show up when people don't expect you, be involved. You know, be that one that, you know, maybe they don't want there all the time, but then folks know this guy is being watched, and this guy gets supports, and this guy is, you know, their family is here. And then you also, if you have a bad feeling, you let the managers know something's not right. But I believe if you have a presence, that also protects your adult child. But the adult child deserves this, right? They deserve to be able to move forward in their life. Everybody deserves to be an adult. And it's very hard. I'm sure a lot of you have worked in situations where that parent dies or goes into a nursing home, or they both do. And then that person is in so much crisis with the grief on top of having to make a transition. It's so much more merciful to try to find ways to make that transition before it's a health emergency with the parents, or before the parents pass. because then they can have supporters in place and support in place for dealing with that loss, which is inevitable. Yeah, thank you, such great questions and such important points. And thank you, Cassie, for sharing that. Yeah, I've seen lots of improvements when people can feel like they have their own life in their own place. So at this point, I guess we can okay, so Diane said we have to be careful when we talk about people getting past their trauma. Professionals feel that they've had enough time to heal and should be happy now. No, isn't that true? Diane, thank you so much. Because the trauma comes back and it comes in waves, and it's just reality. Like, I know when I talk a lot about grief and we talk about grief counseling, it's in waves. And yeah, people aren't all just happy and fine now. We should always be trauma informed. And thank you for this point, Diane, a piece of being trauma informed, because Diane points out that people don't necessarily just get past their trauma, but they can move forward rather than being completely immersed in it. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, because we know with PTSD, the past is present and people are stuck in a loop. So people can heal where they can move forward. And yeah, they may still be triggered. That's why it's important for us to have in their plan what their triggers are, and they need to continue to feel safe and supported, and important to have in plans factors that are safety. That's why I do a training on trauma-informed behavior plans, because we should always be talking about how to keep that person feeling emotionally safe. And oh, thank you. Cassie says being a QIDP has helped me personally place my son in the group home. Right, you knew where he was good. That's great. Where he could be taken care of, give up some of that control. Good for you. Good for you. That's a fantastic story that I would love to share with other people. Thank you. Okay, let's take that 10-minute break. Come back at 11 after. Is that good with everybody?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Hello again, everybody. Thank you for coming back. I really appreciate you hanging in there and all this attention and all this time. Thank you so much. There's a lot of ways to get credits. Thank you for coming here. I really appreciate it. All right. Back from Galesburg. Yay. So thank you. I'm so grateful. I really am. And the Illinois folks, I mean, all of you, just thank you. Thank you for sponsoring this. Thank you for coming. It just does mean so much to me. You know, all these years of working in this field, and just, you know, in the beginning and in the middle, like getting it wrong and thinking, wait a minute, there's more here, and starting to learn about and realize trauma, you know, and what trauma is and the impact. It's been so helpful. Oh, and thank you, Shelley. I'm so glad to, you know, the most important job in our field is DSP. That is it. And I'm so grateful, Shelley, that you are a DSP and you're listening today. This is yay, because really that's the reality. And that's who I've learned from. As I say, when I really have looked at what have been the life-changing lessons, they've been the ones I've gotten from the DSPs and the folks we support. That's it. The people who got it right. Because as I said, I got it wrong sometimes. And you realize, oh, you missed totally, you know, folks have trauma and folks need support and folks need kindness, right? Well, so thank you, Maria. So, and I wanted to show you what happened several years later on that reality show, Born This Way. One of my favorite scenes here, because Steve, who we saw really grappling with his identity, has come a long way. And here he is. Okay.
New episode of Born This Way. I found a girl.
How are you feeling about this?
I'm taking this step by step. We have similar interests in music and movies. All right. She likes Titanic. Okay. And she likes NWA, especially Ice Cube, actually. Really? Yeah. And this is like a big step for me because she has a disability as well. Usually I go for typicals, but I'm giving this a try.
What prompted the pursuit of typical to DS in terms of girls?
Well, it kind of started with like knowing myself actually. Like at first I drawn this big elaborate facade that was sort of making me feel unhappy. Like I've watched many movies about typicals and how they like to express themselves with explicit language and sexuality, and I kind of thought that was me, but that's not real.
I highly encourage, be with someone who you can be real with.
Well, with this girl, she has somebody else, but I'm not gonna let that get to me, because eventually she's gonna go for me. I'm easy to like. Her name is Megan.
Alright.
Hey, you ready for this? You okay, Steven?
Yeah. I've always had crushes, but the way that I'm feeling with Megan, I never felt this honest or real before. I am a little nervous to meet Brendan, but I'm not gonna show anybody.
Hi, guys. This is my boyfriend.
You must be Brendan, right?
Yeah. This is
Nice to
my
meet
boyfriend.
Megan, I feel like so unnatural because she kind of stands out.
Can't wait to bowl.
I'm experiencing everything for the first time. And now I kind of gotten out of my box. These feelings are like from my heart. And I don't know how to express them.
A fairy tale should be me and Brendan. But if he does not want to marry me or have a baby with me, I don't know.
Born this way.
So they do end up together. I loved his confidence, right? He's going to get her. Oh, I'll wear her down. Oh, she's going to want me. And I just thought I'd show that clip in terms of his coming to terms and accepting himself and feeling good about who he is, like feeling okay, like, okay, I can live my life as I am, which is such a critical piece of moving forward. So important. And that's something we can really support people directly with by having lots of experience and having mastery experiences. Bessel van der Kolk talks about a big piece of healing from trauma is to have something that you are mastering, something that you can do. Even the smallest thing is a big thing, a mastery experience in some way, as well as, of course, as we realize, relationships. So now I'm going to go back to my slide. Okay. Thank you for bearing with me. You are the nicest people. So patient. Yeah, so that ability to see yourself, right? There's a line. That's not the line we talked about last week that ate little Susie. No, but that kitten sees himself as a lion, right? But to be able to see your own potential, your own greatness, your own ability to move your life forward, that's so critical. That's so important. And that gives you hope. And that hope is really critical as well. So very interesting theory from Andrew Solomon. I'm probably, many of you have read his book, Far from the Tree, came out about 10 years ago. Such a good book. And he did years of research with different groups of people. He researched folks who were deaf, blind, Down syndrome, autism, many, many categories, and really immersed himself in the communities. And he came up with a theory of identity that I really love and I think is so important. And he said, you know, there's two really ways to look and two aspects of identity. Let's put it that way. There are two aspects. And we're all born into some family, you know, sometimes people don't get to stay with that family, but we're born, and that's our vertical identity. You know, the family you're born into, and then the family who raises you. Sometimes it's not the same, but you know, that identity of the family you belong to, wherever that belonging occurs, is your vertical identity, right? And then he talks about your horizontal identity. And your horizontal identity is finding your people, right? We think about our own lives, right? When we found our friends, and maybe you end up having some romances, and then you end up marrying one of them, and then maybe you end up divorcing one of them and finding another one, or whatever, right? But finding that horizontal identity, oh, this is my tribe. These are my people. This is where I connect. This is where I can, you know, really relate. And he talks about that as a really important piece of identity development in adult development and adult identity. Having that group and having relationships within that group, maybe a marriage and maybe a circle of friends as your horizontal identity. And I think that's so crucial and important. It's important for healing. As we've seen, the research has proven relationships help people to heal, but it's important for a sense of self, right? So it's important when we talk about the importance of leaving the vertical identity is, yes, you're always connected, but if you're stuck in that, then you won't have the ability to develop your horizontal identity, finding your people. So this is Dan and Maria, and these two are one of the happier couples I know. And they're friends of mine, also friends with with Dan's mom and dad. And I shared earlier, Maria's family did not want her marrying Dan, and Dan's family talked them into it. And they were probably the happiest couple I knew during COVID. They found the joy of watching Young and the Restless reruns and The Bold and the Beautiful. And they told their parents were only allowed to visit in the driveway during that first year of COVID. And they said, don't come between those hours that they were showing reruns. But also they just, you know, had this beautiful relationship that's helped them both. Dan has a lot of physical problems, and he's had multiple surgeries, and Maria's been there for him and supported him. And his mom was telling me the other night, we all had dinner, and she said, you know, that Dan had another surgery, and she had him, it was a minor surgery. She had him in her home for 2 days just to make sure he, you know, was getting the treatments he needed before he went back. And he has staff in his house and everything, but she kept him home in her family home. And then she brought him back, and she said, Maria came running out of the house, and they hugged for 3 minutes. It was just the longest hug, and they were so joyful to be reconnected. Now, when I travel and I come back home, my husband gets a nice kiss and a hug, but it's not 3 minutes. That's so sweet. And so she's like, wow, I could just see how much they love each other, how much they've grown. They've been married for 12 years and they have supports. You know, the agency serves them. I've seen some agencies serve 2 couples with staff so that the couples live in different parts of the house. I've seen all kinds of models so that people can have relationships and have that horizontal identity. I am right now in a very exciting project, a dating app for people with intellectual disabilities or whoever, but primarily for folks receiving supports. And I've written a bunch of stories about different types of relationships. We have stories of, you know, struggles where the families don't want them to have a relationship, but they find a way to do it. We have stories where they're, you know, gay and they didn't really realize it, but then they're able to stand up to their family and say, this is what I want. And the stories are animated so people can watch the story. They can also pick a pathway. But in any case, I'm not going to go on and on about it, but I was so excited to be approached by the people developing this app because I've talked for so many years and worked so hard. I ran my singles group saying, we've got to figure out how to support people in having relationships, those who want them. And it's yet again, another human right. And now we see from the Harvard study how important relationships are in happiness. And how can we support people? It's always a balance, I feel like, in our field, that we're always seeking the balance between safety and risk, right? And for years, we used to talk about the dignity of risk, the dignity of risk. And, we also are tasked with helping people to stay safe. And we saw that during COVID, right? We had to put safety first. And so many of you did so many heroic things. Thank you all so much. Thank you. Because we had to make safety the priority, and it was very challenging and very tough. But we can't forget about the importance of risk and supporting people while they take risks. And having a relationship is a risk, right? Finding your identity and who you are involves risk. Trying new things involves risk. It all involves risk, and risk is important because risk is how we discover ourselves. Daisaku Ikeda, a great Buddhist scholar, is here with Nelson Mandela. And he says, ultimately, happiness rests on how you establish a solid sense of self or being. Mandela truly had a solid sense of self. He had so much trauma. He had trauma in his childhood, and then he was in prison for 27 years, his little tiny cell. But he came out, and because of that sense of who he was and that sense of self and purpose, and he just came out with gangbusters, changed South Africa, influenced the whole world. And that sense of self is really critical to people's happiness and well-being, to know who you are and to have that sense. And just sitting in your room every day, or going to a day program and doing the same puzzle over and over again, is not going to develop a sense of self. It's not helping people in the process of discovery, nor is riding in a van around your community and maybe going to the library for an hour and coming home the real way for self-discovery either. Trying new things, finding a mastery experience, doing things, that's the pathway forward. Activity, discovery. People need to see themselves in a different light rather than someone who's being housed or someone who's a tourist in their community, as Dr. Price often says. Someone who has a life, someone who has agency to move their own life forward, right? So critical. There's an important study done by Carol Dweck, and I talk a lot about it, but I'm going to tell you, I think that these days it wouldn't have been approved by an ethics board, because what she did, was a little questionable at the time. At the time it wasn't, but it's a little questionable in the way we see things now. She took kids who all had the same scores and the same test grades, right? And she put half of them in one class and the other half in another class. So class number 1, she told the teachers, these kids are gifted and talented. They are brilliant. And you're working with the top of the top. And then she told the other teachers in class number 2, these kids have learning problems. They really struggle, right? And neither one of those things were true, although, all kids have great potential, but the kids were just really in the average range of academic performance. The class number 1, where the teachers thought that the kids were really gifted and talented and very smart, those kids all went ahead at least 1 grade level in a matter of months. Some went ahead 2 or 3. And those kids where the teachers thought that they had learning problems and difficulties struggled, none of them went ahead, and some actually lost some ground. Expectations, right? And regard, that positive regard versus negative regard. If you've ever had a boss who thought you were great, I hope you have a boss who thinks you're great now, because you are great, I can tell. You do better, right? I had this boss years before I got my degree, used to tell me how smart I was. I would turn into a genius around her. Then later on, I had this other boss who used to say, you have a PhD? How did that happen? And say mean things. And I just got dumber and dumber when I was around him. I said the dumbest things, and I'd be like, oh, I was going to say something. I forgot what it was. What's the name of that guy again? You know, just because I could feel his regard and I responded to it. Whereas that other woman who was so wonderful, I could feel her regard and I got smarter and smarter around her. And this is the power of that the DSP has. This is the power that we have. This is the power of our regard. And when you see the best in somebody, it really helps them to rise to their best. And when you're constantly pointing out what's wrong with them, it helps them to sink to that. You know, if we constantly talk about what their behavior problem is, you know, they're going to feel that that's who they are and be more about that. I know, let's think about ourselves, right? If somebody was constantly telling you everything you do wrong all the time, you'd start to feel that's who you were. You know, every now and then, I have to admit, every now and then I nag my husband. He doesn't like it, but I can't help myself. And I'll be like, are you going to do this? You said you were going to get to that back porch. You know, somebody could fall through that loose board and you got to fix that. And you said you would fix it and you haven't fixed it, right? I can be obnoxious. So what if I was Karyn who nagged her husband? And every day somebody came to my house and said, are you going to nag your husband today? Or are you going to be good? I would nag him 24/7 because I would just start thinking the hell with it. I may as well just nag him all the time. And it would become my sense of who I was, right? So we can't just talk to people about what they're doing wrong all the time, and talking to people about who they are. Praising character is the most important thing. Not always behavior, it's about character. You're a good person. The most effective staff I've seen are the ones that can do that can praise character, that can support people, that can encourage them, you know? Yeah, you know, it's the way it is. It's the way it is. And you know, and also not to have to be punished for having a bad day. So here's the other thing. I'm going to tell you all about myself and all the bad things I do and the good things I do. Let's say I have a really good day and I engage in therapy. I'm really alert. I then, you know, respond to all my emails. I work on the report I'm supposed to be writing, you know, for the grant. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. Then at the end of the day, if I'm working at home, I'll go downstairs. If I'm working at the office, I drive home, open up my refrigerator and do my favorite thing, which is pour myself a glass of Chardonnay. And I used to say, watch Netflix and chill. But then somebody told me that that is probably not the right thing to say. And then I found that out because that is not what's happening. But I relax and watch Netflix, let's put it that way, and drink my Chardonnay. But let's say I have a very bad day and I'm so happy that I have a canceled session. So I just goof off and watch the 3rd hour of Today and really just love everything Hoda does. Oh yeah, Hoda, you're so funny and you're so nice. And, you know, maybe then just play with my cat and, you know, eat a lot. And then maybe I have another session, don't work on the report, don't answer the emails. But guess what? At the end of that day, I can go to my refrigerator and pour myself a glass of Chardonnay. Now you're going to start to think I have a drinking problem. And that could be the reality. Let's hope not, but it did get worse over COVID. But there's nobody standing at my refrigerator saying, nope, you did not have a good day. I heard you goofed off. You're going to say that you worked, but you weren't really working and you didn't do anything about that report that's due, and put that Chardonnay back. Nobody's saying that. And if they were, I would call 911. I got a home intruder. We get away with all kinds of things. And we're able to see ourselves in a positive light, even if we have a bad day. And we're able to just keep going. So I think that somehow we should shift how we do things in a way that entails a little more celebration. Let's celebrate the good. Let's talk about the good. Let's praise the character of folks. Let's say, hey, I see you and you're wonderful. We can hold up 2 possible mirrors. We can show the best possible mirror to someone and say, you care about people. I see how much you care about people. You helped me out the other day. You helped your housemate out. Look at you. Look at what a good person you are. Look at your character and how wonderful it is. Or we can hold up that other mirror, right? The other mirror that says, look what's wrong with you. Are you working on your behavior? Do you know, have you seen your data sheet for this month? It's not good. And we can talk to people and show them their worst. And people will respond either way. People will, rise or fall. And we have that power to encourage and support. And that's trauma informed. Let's help to show that positive mirror. I forgot which side the positive was. Oops. But to show the best side, right? You are wonderful and you are a good, kind person. And I see you. Remember what Mel Baggs said, the worst thing is to be unseen, to be erased, to be unheard. I see you and I hear you and I respect you, right? That's the power we have. And it's the most powerful thing you can do for another human being, to validate them, to see them. I hope that everybody here has someone who really listens to them, because listening is such a gift. When I worked at one agency where they were having all kinds of issues, and we trained all the staff in listening. We just did an active listening training. You can use motivational interviewing now. You can do a number of things, but training the staff in listening, after 1 year, incidents reduced by 85% because folks were being heard. They didn't have to use their behavior to make a connection with someone. They didn't have to use their behavior to communicate because they were being listened to. They were being heard and they were being respected, because the more folks listened, the more they started to appreciate who they were. Like, oh, this guy's kind of cool. It was amazing. So I've come to realize this, that how much power we have and how much power our ability to reflect, to support, to see the best, and to listen, how powerful it is. So finally, almost finally, you'll be encouraged, since you've really been hanging in there, all of you, and some of you not even needing the credits. Thank you so much. It means so much to me. So, and even if you do need the credits, thank you for doing this, because you picked me and I'm so excited. Thank you. But what I developed years ago, something called the happiness assessment. And it's on my website, karynharvey.org. And it's how we look at supporting people in their pursuit of happiness. Because a big piece of healing from trauma is having a sense of hope and joy. And happiness is mostly about looking forward to things, right? Anticipating it and working on it and planning it. And, oh, I'm going to do something fun. And then I'm going to do this. And then we're going to go here. And so we have what's called the happiness assessment. And so in every behavior plan that I sign off on, I don't write them anymore. I'm not going to lie. But every behavior plan that I sign off on, we have a happiness assessment in addition to the functional assessment. We also look at what the triggers are and what that person needs to feel safe. But we look at the 5 levels of happiness, according to Martin Seligman in his book, Flourish. Their pleasure, which is passive happiness. Engagement, which is active happiness, hobbies and pursuits and fun things, video games even, gardening, exercise, playing basketball, anything, whatever is your thing, but being involved. Positive relationships, that's a theme. It's a theme of healing, having relationships. Achievement, which we translate into celebrating. Hey, Joe didn't put a hole in the wall for 3 months. Let's have a party. Like, how can we celebrate people? How can we really see them, validate them, celebrate them? And meaning and purpose, which is so critical. Feeling like you make a difference. Feeling like you know, like Jason did. Wow, I'm going to operate the forklift and then I'm going to be working at the Walmart. What a transformation. So important. So we do this happiness assessment for folks, and we integrate what's called the happiness procedure. So how you can work daily, weekly, and monthly, supporting people in their pursuit of happiness. And I also have one for staff that you should do for yourself if you have time. You can download the happiness assessment for staff. Those of you who are supervisors, you can do it with your staff, and you have a little procedure in the back where you just kind of promise yourself how you're going to work a little harder on being happy. It's self-care and so important. So some tools to recap. We have that safety, connection, empowerment, that triangle to always check in. And oftentimes when somebody starts having a problem, we would go back to, okay, is there a reason why maybe they're not feeling safe anymore? Did something change? Or maybe they're not as connected as they were. Did they lose someone? Or maybe they lost a choice or some kind of power in their life. What's missing? We go back to the triangle and reassess. Building that positive identity, that giving that positive regard, fostering and coaching relationships. People need support. They need coaching, social coaching, right? I always tell the staff, think of yourselves as a coach. I love that, right? Rather than the caregiver or the enforcer, right? Or the bodyguard, you know, you're a coach. Coach that person in getting all kinds of relationships in their life that they need, and finding that happiness in their happiness assessment, you know? And that I also have a daily happiness worksheet, which is like a gratitude journal, because so much research shows how just writing every day several things that you appreciate about that day help you become more optimistic, more hopeful, and more joyful. So a daily happiness assessment, a worksheet, sorry, is something that folks can do with their staff or with their family, and just each day, 3 things that they appreciate about that day, something that was really amazing or awesome, like a flower or a sunrise or something, and something that made them smile or laugh. And then finally, always having something to look forward to, which is so critical, so important. So important. We all need that hope. We all need something to look forward to. And it's so important for daily living, right? Quality of life, to have something you're excited about, something you're looking forward to, which is yet another reason why COVID was so hard, because all of a sudden that was wiped out. Oh no, we're not going on outings. We're not going to rock concerts. We're not doing this. We're not doing that. And that was tough for everybody. And here we have our Amanda Gorman, one of my new favorite poets, right? She says, there's always light, if only we are brave enough to see it, and if only we are brave enough to be it. And here's where I have to thank all of you, because you guys are the light. You've chosen this work. You've chosen to see the unseen, to support the people who've been marginalized in so many cases, and to be that present person in their lives, and to support the supporters, which is also so critical. So thank you so much for all you do, and the fact that you're here and you care. So I have to celebrate you and all that you do. So thank you so much. And now we can open it up. Yeah, the daily happiness worksheet is on my page on my website. And now we can open it up for questions again, or anything anyone would like to share, you know, thoughts that come up, and you know, whatever strikes you, or maybe there's something that, you know, you feel wasn't discussed. I'll tell you what I also talk about that I didn't really say much about today is how much trauma the family has, and often how much trauma staff bring. And that sometimes, you know, when we're working with folks, we can have that secondary trauma. I do a trauma-informed leadership where we talk a lot about that. And thank you so much for the nice comments.
We did have someone ask if you would be able to provide a list of the books that you have discussed throughout your presentation. I know.
Remember what I said. I can. In fact, I can say them right now, or I can try to list them, or I can just email a list if I mean, my favorites are, I can say them if that's okay, if people want. So The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, is a wonderful book that really explains the kind of the impact of trauma on so many levels. I have some references. So if you receive the PDF of the PowerPoint, there is a reference section. So you can see that. Let's see, yeah, I do have the reference section on there. Another book, you know, I didn't mention all the books that are so wonderful. The Feeling of an Unperson. Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad, Allison. Thank you so much. You're a nurse and just seeing people and yeah, being intentional about it. I'm sure you were always there for them, but being intentional with seeing people and being there for them is so wonderful. So The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog is a very important book, written by Bruce Perry. The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog. Another book by Bruce Perry he did with Oprah, and I really recommend listening to it as an audiobook because they both speak and talk about it. Oh, I'm so glad, Kelly. It's so good. And I'm sorry for all the chats I missed because when I was sharing my screen, it was hard for me to look and go back and forth. But the second book by Bruce Perry that he wrote with Oprah is What Happened to You? And that's a very powerful book. So, you know, kind of books about trauma. A very early book written that was actually probably one of the biggest turning points in the trauma field is Trauma and Recovery by Judith Herman. And she was one of the first people to point out that it wasn't just vets who were suffering from PTSD, that people who've experienced intense trauma suffer from it as well, which was back then revolutionary. The Deepest Well is another book by Nadine Burke. So I didn't even mention half these books. Now you got me going. I'm just going to talk about books. Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I'm sorry to have implied that anyone was just here for credits. Thank you, Elizabeth. That's so wonderful. I appreciate it. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you so much. I appreciate this so much. You know, it's just such an honor to be able to give this talk and to be able to really share the stories. I have many, many more, you know, just of very courageous people who I don't know if I would have that courage to keep going in the face of all the rejection and the struggle and sometimes the scorn. It's true bravery. And sharing those stories is really an honor for me to be able to do. Oh, okay, great. So you've got, yeah, there's a PDF, the PowerPoint, and that has references. And The Good Life is the other book I talked about by Robert Waldinger and somebody Schultz. Oh, thank you, Shelley. And The Good Life is really a game changer. Or it's really the Harvard study is a game changer because so often we have not recognized the importance of relationships. They don't talk about people with disabilities because so many people don't. But the reality is, as David Petoniak points out, loneliness is our biggest problem. And that's the problem we have to start tackling head on, right? How can we help people to have real relationships, real and fulfilling relationships that, you know, aren't paid? And how can we shift that role of staff from the be all and the end all to the supporter and coach? Because the staff are going to leave. You're going to get promoted or you're going to find a better job. You know, people are going to move on, and they should be able to move on. So they can't be the end of the road. They can't be that one relationship. Oh, thank you, Shelley. Thank you all so much. So I guess that's, you know, I can, as you can see, I can rant and rave.
I don't know if you saw Eddie's comment. He said that you've mentioned along the way that you've made mistakes. Could you just let people in our field know that it's okay to make mistakes and admit them?
Okay, I'm still alive. Nobody shot me and I didn't shoot myself. I've made so many mistakes. But honestly, thank you, Eddie. Honestly, the mistakes were what taught me the most. Because when you mess up, you remember it and you're like, oh, I don't want to do that again. or when you realize, when you have that sinking feeling that things are going badly because you directed people in the wrong way. That's a really bad feeling. Oh, I set them up. So yeah, I'm honest about that because there's no hiding it. If you get to know me, you'll know it's true. So thank you so much.
Well, I don't see any more questions coming through. Obviously, thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge and experience. I think I can speak for everyone here that everyone is truly appreciative of the information that you have shared. And we really are honored that you have been able to join in this journey with us.
Oh, the honor is all mine. It really is. Thank you so much. From my heart, there's my colorful heart. Thank you.
All right, so I will get continuing education out for that second part. Again, please give me about 14 days to get that out. And thank you everyone for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much, Danielle, for all the support. And thank you everybody for being here.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
You too.